Ever thought about selling your hoarded items? Things from the 70s are now worth fortunes today. Maybe you might have some of these in your attic, so let's see what potential treasures we are sitting on. Let's start with an item we have probably always wondered about, the original Apple I computer from 1976. We all are curious about when the lengthy numbered rush of iPhone products actually started, what the original iPhone I was, or what the first computer or MacBook looked like. Well, the Apple I computer is now considered a thing of curiosity that people can now attach a price tag to. The computer's value comes from how historical it is, since the technology they first used in this bad boy was the blueprint for everything that followed. The Apple II and all future computers would use the foundation of this set, and you can even find one enshrined at the Apple headquarters. In today's market, if you actually happen to have one of these, you could cash almost $500,000 for it. Pretty neat for a janky computer you do not use anymore, right? Speaking of rare items, there were only ever 12 of the original Kenner Star Wars action figures from 1977. You had Luke, Leia, Chewie, Obi-Wan, Darth Vader, and all the big names. The rest were popular characters like the first Stormtroopers or Jawa. A rare Boba Fett figure can fetch an incredible price, as one had even gone for a staggering $157,000. Mint condition action figures catch the highest prices, and if you have the original packaging too, that's a premium. Also, we know there are lots of fans of Darth Vader and Obi-Wan out there, but we have to be honest. If you have a pristine Luke Skywalker, then that is probably the most valuable one. If you ever feel like parting with a Star Wars classic, you might be able to move up economically a neighborhood or two, or at least be set for the foreseeable future with $25,000 sitting in your bank account. People really held a special consideration for the original Star Wars films and merchandise. Wayne Gretzky was a hockey player who paved a historic legacy that inspired some pretty pricey merchandise of its own in today's inflation-governed market. The guy had so many trophies, achievements, and records both set and broken that he was one of the most popular players in the country at the time. You have to understand that hockey was viewed as an individual performance sport before this man's career redefined the standards. More and more teams and players started considering it a group effort and played according to that mindset too, after they saw his success. A 1979 OPC Edmonton Oilers Wayne Gretzky Rookie Card 18 was sold for $3 million in mint condition. Similarly, baseball cards gained traction in the 1970s. What seemed like playing cards over 50 years ago have some serious value today. Each card back that was sold had a unique shot of a famous baseball player, along with a rating of the player's skills. You can still find lower-grade copies for much cheaper today, but if you have one, the original baseball cards, they could sell for a fortune. You see, sports fans love memorabilia, which tends to make the bidding wars for such cards extremely high. This can be attributed to the sale of a Topps Mickey Mantle card that was sold for a whopping $12 million. These are literally just collectible baseball cards we are talking about, worth life-changing amounts because they are from 50 years old. By now, you must be thinking that the closer the thing is in relevance to the franchise, person, or piece of media, the more it will fetch in auctions and on websites. If Star Wars action figures can be worth that much, then it is no surprise that a mint condition copy of the first Star Wars comic book can fetch over $7,000. If you have a slightly lesser grade copy, you can still fetch a good price for it. But a signed mint condition copy can even cost up to $13,000. This was the first Star Wars comic from Marvel, and it came out in 1977, starting a name that today even our children know about without us teaching it to them. Still, any hardcore fan may think twice about parting with something this rare. Mego did not really push past the 80s too much, and eventually it did fade out without becoming a household name for the later generations. But the original Mego Robin action figures are still worth a lot. That's purely because of nostalgia, by the way, since an incredible amount of people did grow up with their comic books and toy lines. It became a sort of a nice pop culture moment that America held dear in its heart, so the action figures are really highly desired collectibles. Whether you were a DC fan or a Marvel fan, Mego had the superhero that inspired you and kept you hooked for every single episode. Mego made some of the best superheroes ever back then, and kids all over could immerse themselves even more with their favorite characters. The bigger your collection, the cooler you were to other kids at school. So there was always that. An Aquaman figure sold for over $7,000 in 2006, and Bruce Wayne himself would fetch a big $8,000. Even more popular heroes like Spider-Man and Superman cost 5 digits or more. Alpine Pez dispensers are figures whose prices might not make sense to you initially, but in cultural hubs like New York, Alpine Pez dispensers had a lot of significance for Americans who grew up shooting space guns and popping plastic heads on their favorite dispensers. A Landerbank Hippo. A, for example, is worth $900 in mint condition, but a soft head Captain Hook in the same state is worth more than $1,000. Some figures are known to go up to prices of $3,000 for the mustached variant, and even more than that for the clean-shaven one. Guess people had a type back then? If only shaving in real life gave you that kind of appreciation in your market value too. Either way, would you pay for one of these if you grew up with them? Or do you think this is a bit of a stretch for a pretty toy? There have definitely been stranger collectibles, that is for sure. The 70s were not just a decade of groundbreaking cinema and nostalgic figures, but also of music and art that changed the industry and still makes rounds across the world today. Music like David Bowie's Diamond Dogs is worth a lot, and an original copy of the album can fetch up to 35 grand. While most of the copies were pulled back by the label and stopped being in circulation throughout the market, some company employees secretly kept a few original copies. If you find yourself jamming to David Bowie on your weekends, maybe this is a collectible album you might want to hang in your room. At least it would be a pretty cool flex, right? A lot of Bowie's music makes up some of the most valuable vinyl records available today, and Diamond Dogs was special for being one of his first hits. Do not fret if you have some other albums, though, because they all can compete with each other in terms of how much they can sell for. It all depends on the condition, so just make sure to take care of what you have. Everybody wants to go beyond action figures and actually feel like they are in their favorite hero's shoes. And for some, that looks like wearing the whole outfit or just a part of it. Stuff like Spider-Man's mask or Remco's Batman utility belt can sell for prices that make them seem like they really are the original thing right out of the comics. After all, getting over 3 grand for a utility belt is pretty neat, and we cannot blame people for the price of this collectible item either. Batman is one of the most popular superheroes today, but his rise to stardom in the 70s was definitely a "you had to be there" moment. People who did grow up in that era definitely remember how much a solid utility belt felt like. It felt as if you were the Dark Knight himself about to leap into Gotham. When you think of valuable items from past decades, it makes sense to only think about entertainment or art, but even furniture can cost a hefty dime if it is the right piece. There are probably no better pieces than Ikea's Teak furniture that they brought out in the 70s. Known for their exquisite craftsmanship and for the beauty of the material itself, these are worth a lot in the buyer's market for every reason you can think of. People want a beautiful teak table in their living room, and you would be surprised how passionate the bidding can get. Also, white interior designing was really popular back in that decade, and teak went amazing next to silver or white walls. Tables from the 70s can cost thousands of dollars, and that is a testament to the longevity of teak too. So really, if you can afford it, there is no better table to get. Evel Knievel stunt cycles were popular boxed action figures that came out in the 70s, and for kids who loved their dad's Harley-Davidson and wanted one of their own, this was as close as they could get. They stopped being produced a while into the 90s, and Evel Knievel would continue on to other products and toy lines, but the original 1973 action figures are still valuable to some committed fans. Good condition action figures can sell for up to $200 to $300, while a mint condition ideal set can go up for $1,000, which is a pretty respectable value. Maybe you can put it away to your 70s biker project funds if you find one of these. The Lord of the Rings series has just as much of a valid claim to fame as any other on this list, if not more so, and its action figures hold that same authority and presence in the eyes of fans. Vintage Knickerbocker action figures of the iconic crew from the franchise can go up to 2 grand or more on auctioning websites, and mint condition figures that look like they have not been taken out. The box are worth even more. Plus, as usual, if you have the packaging, you get a nice extra bonus. If you were an avid collector back then, and trust us, there were loads of them, take a look and see if you can dig something up. Before the days of Bratz and along the same time as Barbie, Blythe fashion dolls were the sweethearts of every girl in America. 28 centimeters long and known for their oversized heads, which gave them a bubbly, cute look, these only sold for a year in the market. That made them even more of a desired item, as each doll was special and had its own style and name with a theme centered around it. They had made up personalities for each of the dolls, and that is why they are such great collectible items. You can get up to $1,000 for one of these. If it were not for the company eventually being taken over, these dolls would probably have had a long and very profitable career in the United States. Mattel contributed heavily to pop culture as a whole when they made the Shogun Warriors Godzilla, which is perhaps the most iconic Zilla figure you can get in America. Godzilla was already the hottest thing in the States because of Godzilla vs. Megalon, which was released in 1976 and dominated blockbusters. Plus, older films were also getting a lot of attention and hype on magazines and weekend shows. It was a great time to be a Godzilla fan, and if you were one in that special decade, then you might remember the Shogun figures. Specifically made in Japan and known for its unique emerald green, this figure was widely sold in toy stores throughout the nation and a common Christmas present for kids to wake up to. The brunette bestie of Barbie, Walk Lively Steffi, is still a toy that people would shill out a few $100 bills for. The 1971 variant was really popular with girls, especially brown-haired kids throughout the nation, as Barbie typically tended to be blonde. It felt like a Barbie figure they could resonate with more, and it was also just refreshing to see a new face in a new design. With her painted fingernails and bright red dress, Walk Lively Steffi Barbiers made their way to shelves and did very successfully throughout the industry in the 70s. Despite being discontinued, they are enough of a niche interest in the overall cultural landscape of America that people would still pay on auction sites for them. If you feel like partying with one of your childhood toys for a good free paycheck, maybe you can check if you have Steffi lying around somewhere. Chris Van Allsburg's magnum opus, The Garden of Abdul Ghazi, is also a child's favorite that rose in value significantly as it racked on the years. It was a unique picture book that explored ideas that were not present in most books at the time, especially incorporating surrealism in his own unique art style. The picture book was known for evoking childish curiosity while blurring the lines between real and fantasy using its depictions, and it did quite well in the 70s. Vintage books like this that fall out of production and only have a scant few copies remaining in the country can appreciate like 10 times the value you bought them for. You may have gotten this book for $30 to $50, but premium condition first editions are worth over $1,000 now. Talk about a glow up for the ages, huh? Speaking of popular books from the 70s, let's talk about 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. Few works get to pioneer not only the industry they get released into, but also the platform they use to express an idea, product, or concept. 100 Years of Solitude was widely agreed to be one of the most well-made and beloved books to emerge from the 70s, and its dreamlike story that incorporated the fantasy genre into a wondrous work of magical realism. It used real-life events to create a world that was very easy to get lost into, while still telling a concise story you could relate to and follow along. First editions of the book, including any signed copies, can fetch up to thousands of dollars if sold to the right fan. The Ford Maverick, similarly, was something that broke all industry norms and even outsold the Santa Cruz 68, and for a long time, this was the apple of every cathead's eyes. If you ever purchased the mean Maverick model cars that you could get a whole kit for and build yourself, you know just how trendy this car was. It was like the Ferraris and Challengers of today, and that is why those kits can still sell for so much. Maybe you have an old mean Maverick model car that you got one odd Thanksgiving you never got around to building. Suddenly you watch this video and find out it is worth thousands of dollars. You might be sitting on a pretty good bag and not even know it. But of course, that is all assuming that you are willing to part with such a collector's item. There are no cars that are as iconic as a pair of Hot Wheels, though. And the 1977 variants are extensively sought out by literally everyone who is into collecting, especially the red line cars which had those red stripes across their tires and the Spectra Flame paint. Today, vintage Hot Wheels cars are worth up to $2,000 to $8,000 if you have some that are in good condition and left in their original packaging. The 70s was the decade when Hot Wheels really got around to setting its name and captured much of the market to become the household presence we know it to be today. It was a pretty good gift for some and a common shopping spree purchase for others. Lots of people definitely loved playing with their favorite Hot Wheels cars, so we are not surprised at all to hear all the noise for them. The Addams Family is also a show that we recognize today pretty easily, but back in the 70s it was still in its bright and early days, gaining more and more viewers with each episode. Hence, merchandise from back then is significantly higher in value than it used to be, even for simple items like the Addams Family metal lunchbox, which can get you a few $100s if you have it in decent condition. Of course, that means absolutely no scratches or deterioration of the metal or box itself, but that is still one pricey package to have your lunch in. People really did grow up with the Addams Family though, so it is not a stretch to say they would splurge a few $100s for a bit of a nostalgia trip that would make their storage closet cuter. Items like this really add an air of personalization, which is a big part of why people pay so much for them in the first place. So did any of these valuable items stir up nostalgic memories? If so, like this video, click subscribe, and stay tuned for more nostalgia trips.